Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown, Series 2, titled Ignorance, the Mother of Devotion. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me tonight are my regular guests, Mr. Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher, all the way up from Hackensack, New Jersey tonight on this cold weather, and I'll call him Guru of the Bible and Research of the Bible. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, and welcome. Also, one of my regular guests is Reverend Hewitt, medium and founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church, and a gentleman who has also been working very closely with Mr. Schwartz, and between the two of them together have amassed a large amount of knowledge with respect to spirituality and science and the Bible. And it is the cornerstone of this television program. So welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay. Tonight's show, as you may or may not know, viewers, we sort of pick a topic for each show. And tonight's show is going to be titled Heaven and Hell. And some of you are probably wondering, well, what could you possibly be talking about with a title like that? And heaven and hell are two things that, through extensive research, Reverend Hewitt and Mr. Sidney Schwartz have, should I say, unearthed some very different information that most people are not aware of with respect to heaven and hell. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to turn the camera over to Reverend Hewitt, and what I want to do is ask him a little bit about himself with respect to being a medium and how this gift came about, which evidently started when he was a very young man, and then hopefully take you from there and show you how he obtains some of this information, and then tie that together with Mr. Sidney Schwartz's research. And I think you'll find this to be very challenging for those of you. Also, to let you know, later on in the program, we will be opening up the phones for the viewers who might have some questions to ask our two experts, suggestions, or just general thoughts on the topic. And we welcome your calls, but in a little bit from now. Okay, Carl. Welcome again to the show.
Thank you.
I understand as a young man, you had found that you were significantly different from other children. Do you want to tell me, when you had talked a little bit about yourself to me, what do you mean about that you were different?
Evidently, I was born with the gift of the Spirit. But my father and my family being Baptist, anything you couldn't see, touch, taste, or smell was the work of the boogeyman, the devil to some people. And there was a lot of strange things happening around me when I was a little child, all the way back, as far back as I can remember. And people would come to the house and ask my parents. They would come and visit my family, and then I would hear a voice, as clear as you're hearing my voice right now, and I would repeat what I'm hearing. And these people would leave the house and come back at another time and ask my father or mother, how did that child, most of the time they call me a young'un, that's an expression in that part of North Carolina, how did this young'un know that? You see, and my father could never explain any of this. And so when I first went to school, they came and got me, the county nurse did, and took me to the city about 35 miles away and had my eyes tested, my ears tested, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And then a week or so later, they came back and took me to Duke University. Duke is similar to Yale, and they had me tested there too, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. I found out later on in life that they were trying to find proof to put me away permanently because they thought I was possessed, by the devil or something like that.
Now, that was one of the questions I had. Why would they take you to different institutions and have you tested. What would be wrong with the fact that you could predict things or know things before other people?
Well, they couldn't understand how I would say things that I was not even old enough to know what that meant. I would just simply repeat what I was hearing without even knowing what I'm doing, you see. And so they were trying to get something on me to put me away. And I found out later on in life that there was a lot of people. In fact, there was a wonderful medium that was put here in Norwich State Hospital, and that was back in the 60s. I think it was 66 or 67 that these nurses came and got me, and it was the Kettle Building. Are you familiar with that building at all?
Yes, I am.
Okay. They worked in the Kettle Building, and they didn't tell me anything about this person. They wanted me to visit the place. I went there. And we went in the elevator, we went upstairs, top floor, and we went into this one room, and all of these nurses, they were in a closed-in, glassed-in booth, and they wanted me to go visit a woman who they would bring out, and she would sit at a table way over there by herself. And they cleared that room out completely of all furniture and everything except that one table way over. And so they led me over to that table, and I sat down, and then they brought this young lady out there. She's about 40, I think. And I was trying to get a conversation started with her. In the meantime, they did not tell me a thing about her. But when she walked out there, I could see the light around her body, and I knew that she was gifted. She had the gift of spirit. And so when I tried to carry on a conversation with her, she was just staring at me, but she wouldn't say a word. And then I said, finally, I said, well, if you don't want to talk to me, I said, I've got a lot of things to do. I'm going to have to go back to my job. And then the first thing she said to me was, do you believe there's a God? And I knew I had to say the right thing right then and there, otherwise I would lose her. And I said, well, I used to think there wasn't when I was a child, but the way I've been treated, I'm not too sure there wasn't, I'm not too sure about anything anymore. And I said, when I was a child, I saw people that no one else could see, and I heard voices that no one else could hear. And right away she said, well, why aren't you in here? And I said, that's happened to you. She says, yes, it did. I said, how long have you been here? And right away she stuttered. She didn't know what to say. She said, well, I came here when I was 19. I said, well, how old are you right now? And she says, 41. And I said, well, who brought you here? And she said that her parents and a priest. And I went to see the man who was the president of the place at the time. And he said, under the laws that she was brought in, she could not, we cannot release her. I said, there's nothing wrong with her except she's a medium. That's all there is to it. She was put in here. So they tried to find something wrong with me to put me away when I was a child, but they couldn't find anything.
That's interesting. So now that woman that you met ended up staying at the state hospital.
I don't know what happened. Wait a minute. I did hear through another person later on that she had passed away.
That's very sad.
It was very sad, very sad.
For nothing more than being able to predict or hear things.
Yeah, she was a gifted medium. That's all there was to it.
And perhaps if some of the people around her knew some of the things that the two of you have been able to share with a lot of other people, and especially through this program, then maybe we wouldn't have people treated this way around us.
Right. There was a woman here in Norwich by the name of Callista Reed, a wonderful trance medium. And she also had a lot of problems too because her family did not understand it. The church would not accept that, and so she was brought up Catholic. And she and I had long talks about this. She's also passed on too. She was a wonderful medium. A lot of people that's watching this program, I'm sure they would remember her.
Now, Carl, your family wasn't very helpful.
Not at all.
You had mentioned that your father, perhaps in a past show, was a minister, a Baptist minister?
He was assistant pastor.
Minister, okay.
Baptist church.
And you didn't really gain any guidance or help or support, I'm guessing, from your father either.
Not a bit.
Where did you go? Who did you turn to?
Well, I quit school simply because the only friend I had at school, she also had the gift too, but she committed suicide when she was 15. And then I quit school and I hitchhiked all over the Southeast, and I went to all the churches everywhere that had a steeple on. Any building that had a steeple on it, I went there to try to find out, get some answers. And I was listening to, I wound up living at a rooming house because I had to get a job. I tried to go back and get my education. And I was listening to singing on Sunday morning, and it was coming from a black church in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I was living. And for some reason or another, I was attracted to the singing so much. And I went out, it was in April, I remember that. I went out for a walk, and even though I was walking up the street, I could still hear that music. It was just as if I'm on a radio and I'm listening to it, you see? And pretty soon I wound up right in front of this church. And I didn't give it any thought because I'm not one of those people that it don't matter to me what color a person's skin is. And so I walked in the church. I was the only white person that ever went into that church. I went into that church and there was two aisles, one down this way, one down this way. And I walked down that way, and I was drawn in there, just like a magnet. I was drawn in there, and when I walked in, there was about 5 or 6 people standing in that front row. Every seat was taken. These people, it was as if it was part of a stage play, and every one of them marched right over there and stood in front of those other people, because part of the church was out here, that way, and back here, you see. And it was as if they were on cue. They did this, and they left this little boy, this young boy, in this row of seats. I was the only person there. They all went over there and stood and finished singing, and the song that they were singing, "We shall gather at the river." I will never forget that as long as I live. And the minister, as soon as the song was over, he came down and he whispered to me. He bent down and he said, "Son, I know that you see visions and you hear voices." He says, "I know they're from God, but I don't know anything beyond that." And I tried to talk to him about that later, and did you know what he said? He said, "Son, I didn't say those words to you."
Really?
Wow.
So now you walk into a Baptist church in the South.
Yeah,
the minister tells you that he can
black church.
He can see this, but he doesn't remember after.
He doesn't remember it because some entity in the world of spirit used his vocal cords to tell me, give me that message, you see. That was the only little spark that I got from anybody that kept me going. And after that, I went everywhere looking for messages, trying to get some answers, and it was here in Connecticut that I went to the first medium, and that was in Willimantic, by the way.
Okay.
And she was Reverend Catherine Margiotti, and she was originally from New Jersey, but she married this man and moved to Waterbury. She was a fabulous medium. And when the Spirit started speaking, using her vocal cords to talk to me, they told me everything I ever did, how I was treated, even to going into this black church in Wilmington where no other white person had ever been. And what the message that was given to me by this man, he was a little short guy, and it was the first time I ever felt so good. I was so happy at what happened in that church that I don't even remember any other part of it.
Really?
I do know that as I was going out the door, there were several people that I knew they wanted to hug me, and I hugged them. I felt so good when I went out of there. And of course, I would never tell any of this to my family, you know. They were prejudiced. I hate to say it, but they were very prejudiced.
So you headed north, and you met someone here who validated
Oh, yeah.
everything.
Everything.
That must have felt wonderful.
It was wonderful. I was floating. I think I floated out of that building.
Now, you're still here. You're still in the north.
I'm still in the north.
And you have set up a teaching ministry
Yeah,
and a healing ministry.
right.
And I understand that people can go to this ministry and
It's a healing
they can
minis-
learn.
That's right. It's a healing ministry, not only healing the body, but healing the mind. Because just as we read in the scriptures, Jesus himself came to the world to teach the gifts of the Spirit. This is all he taught, and this is why he was destroyed. He did not die for the sins of the world. He died for the sins of the priest. They could not compete with him. He was a threat to them. And so everybody was following him, the stranger. They were ignoring the priest. And this is why he was killed.
Now, just to clarify to our viewers that when Reverend Hewitt mentioned gifts of the Spirit, for those of you out there, what we are referring to are different characteristics that people possess. For example, being clairaudient, able to hear
A
spirit.
voice. You hear with the inner
Okay.
ear.
Or clairvoyant.
Clairvoyant is able to see in another time.
Okay. Now, you yourself, Carl, possess several of these
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah.
And likewise, my understanding is that people can come to you like a teacher and learn to try to develop themselves.
A lot of people, Tina, have the potential to be an instrument of the Spirit, but somewhere along the line, through family or the church or something, they are frightened by it because they try to tell them that this is the work of the devil and all of that, you know, and that isn't true at all. There's no such thing. That was all made up. It's created.
Now, one of your logos or one of your mottos to your church refers to knowledge being your passport into forever. I think I remembered reading something like that in one of the brochures that you have. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yes, I'll be glad to. The Spirit people who have come to me have been teaching me throughout my whole lifetime, and they explain to me where the soul is. I mean, you don't find this out in any church. They don't even know. And if they knew what this man knows, they would all know the truth about this. I'm going to say something over on this program tonight that I've never said to him. It's a confession. When he first came to me was in 1975, I believe, right? First time?
Yes, that's right.
Well, within the 2 years after he first came, I got 3 or 4, let me put it this way, I got several phone calls from where he works, at one of the schools where he's a teacher. And they were very concerned that he was getting involved in this. This is their term, involved. Mm-hmm. And if the parents found out what he was doing, they might not let their children be under him at the school, you see. And they were very worried about him. They were really worried because they all liked him and they didn't want to lose him or him getting kicked out of school. And so I was told by the voices from the other dimension that they're going to protect him, you see. Now this was about 20, almost 25 years ago, you see.
Okay.
He's still there and he's educated. He's educated a lot of the other teachers that were there, but they were worried about him. I've never told him this. I was afraid that he would run away because Spirit told me that he was the scribe that they had led in my path, and he was the one to write the books, you see.
Okay.
And he has a fabulous memory, which I don't have. And sometimes I have to call him up and ask him, there's a certain thing in the Bible, and he, you know, like this.
Now, you were talking a little bit about the soul.
The soul.
Okay.
When they taught me the soul is right behind the breastbone. The soul is a energy field. They said it's similar to, but not the same thing as what we would call the black box in an airplane. It records everything that we've ever done, and it holds it there. And that when a person dies and the heart stops, it gives birth to the spirit body, which is the other body that is discussed in Corinthians. We're born with 2 bodies.
Okay. Okay.
And so it gives birth to the spirit body. Now, the spirit body is energy, and it's not visible to our eyes unless you have second sight. And so the person is as much alive, sometimes usually more than they were in the physical body. And their body never looks over 30 years old, even though they may die at 90 years, see? And they live in these different levels. You go from Hertzian to infrared.
Right. Tina, we have some graphics that shows us the 6 levels of heaven or the spirit world.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we're actually doing now is crossing into the topic of the night, and which is heaven and hell. And so discussing what happens when someone dies and the soul leaves the physical body is something that a lot of people, I'm sure, are not aware of. And the understanding for a lot of people is that, or at least what I was also raised with, is that your body goes into the ground, it decomposes, that's it, there is no more. And if you're a good person while you're on this earth plane, you'll go to heaven and you'll meet someone who will review your life and say you were good, bad, or the other, and you either go to heaven or you go to hell.
Wrongo in the Congo.
So now, our show tonight is with the hopes of dispelling some of the myth of what heaven has come to mean to many people. And so I believe that you have brought some graphics with you that do a much better job of explaining this than I could probably do in asking you questions. And perhaps what we want to do now is to begin with Sidney Schwartz.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, if we could have the graphics that start off with the 7 levels of heaven. Actually, the very first level would be the Hertzian level, which is the physical plane. And on the physical plane, it's the frequency that we're in right now. Okay, if we could have the next graphic, please. There's the Hertzian level. That's the level of television. They call television Hertzian. And it's the whole physical world is in the Hertzian level. The next slide, please, would show what's known as the veil. And the veil separates the physical world from the spirit world. The second level, which would be the next slide, would be the infrared slide. And that is the lowest level frequency of the spirit world. Now, when Jesus taught, he said that in I think it's the book of John, chapter 14, the second verse. He said, "My Father's house are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you there." And what we've been told is that Jesus never really said that. What he said was, "In my Father's house are many dimensions."
Many dimensions.
Each of these frequencies that we're showing on the screen is a separate dimension.
Okay.
And it's the infrared one is the lowest one, and that actually is a range of frequency. And on the highest range of that low frequency is a place called the hospital. And I'll let Carl explain the hospital because he had an experience about that.
Excuse me, before you go into the hospital explanation, you said infrared. For our viewers out there, would that have any correlation with things that infrared cameras could pick up, or infrared light, or goggles?
Yes.
Is that literally the same dimension that you're talking about?
Well, the only way I can explain that is if a person was going through surgery, and the heart stops, and they get the heart going again, and when the person gets well enough, they'll tell somebody, maybe it was my imagination, but for a few moments, I was up above the operating table looking down, watching, listening to everything that was being said. You see, that means that the spirit left the body because the heart stopped. The spirit left the body and it went into infrared, which is the first level. And then beyond that is visible light. And visible light is the one that we...
Okay, talk about the hospital first.
Oh, yeah. There's a hospital in what is known as visible light. And
Infrared.
And infrared. And there are billions, not millions, billions of people that have passed over, and because they're programmed, the programming takes place in the soul, they're programmed that they will go to sleep, and they will sleep until a Messiah comes and wakes them up. And these people are programmed to do that, and when they die, they will go to sleep. And there were so many people sleeping over there that in the 3rd, 4th century, other people that had already been in these, that gone into these other levels, they had to do something with all of these people that were asleep all over the place, so they created a hospital. And I argued with them, there's no such thing, I do not believe this. I do not believe there's a hospital in what we term heaven. And they said, well, we'll take you there one day, and they did, 1997, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a very bad experience for me. I went into trance, I left my own body, and I went into this other dimension. Everything there was orange in color, everything. Walls, everything. And there's no way you could tell how big this place was. It went into forever, the size of this place. And the people, the bodies were lined up probably 3 inches between each one from the floor right onto the ceiling. No beds, no mattresses or anything. There's just the spirit was, the body was laying like this. And there was a woman, she looked to be about 55. And she had just recently passed, but she was not programmed to sleep. She found her mother. Her mother was there, and she tried to wake her mother up, and her mother raised her head up, looked at her, put her head back, and closed her eyes. She would not wake up because she was programmed that if anybody tries to wake her up, it will be the devil disguising himself as one of the members of the family.
Let me just interrupt here, Carl, because that thought was put into the Bible. And in the 2nd book of Corinthians, chapter 11, verse 14, it reads, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light." So they actually taught that Satan could imitate an angel, so that if a person did have contact or saw a person from the spirit world, which would resemble an angel, they would be afraid to talk to that angel, thinking that it might be the devil in disguise. This was one of the ways that the church programmed people to be afraid of all this work, of psychic phenomena, of communicating with the spirit world.
And that brings up another point here. The word psychic means soul and mind. A lot of people don't even look it up because the word has been tainted. I hate that word, psychic. I really do. It's been tainted.
Now, because of your abilities to see and hear entities in the spirit world,
Yeah.
you asked this very specific question, and you didn't believe it, and you doubted it, and then they showed you the answer.
They've done that many times on different things.
And so now having the knowledge before you die really can decide quite a bit about what does happen to you. And if you go to this heaven hospital type of place, I thought that everyone goes someplace, and whether you've been good or bad, you go to one place if you're good and you go to another place if you're bad. So you mean to tell me everybody just goes one place?
No, there are different levels.
Okay.
In my father's house are many dimensions.
Okay.
There are dimensions over there that bad people go, all bad people. Every person, you know, you take the worst kind of a person on the planet, they will go to a dimension where the same kind of people are there. Each person becomes the mirror image of the other person. You get a person that's loving and caring, you're going to go where loving and caring people go to.
So you mean to tell me Hitler didn't go to hell?
It's probably a hell as far as he's concerned. I mean, there is no such place as a place that's burning, fire. They got that, and put it in the books in 325 at the Council of Nicaea, simply because on the outskirts of Jerusalem, there was a place way up on a knoll where there's no trees, bushes, grass, nothing will grow in. They call it the hell region, and everybody that had something like we used to have city dumps here in America. Well, that was a city dump, and the families that did not have money to bury the dead would wrap their dead in something similar to burlap, but not the same thing as burlap, and they would throw the body on the fire and it would be cremated. But the skull was the last thing that would break down completely, and these men, the priests that went there to try to gather all of the data and write this in the book where they were going to the meeting at what's the name?
Nicaea?
At Nicaea. So they went there because they were curious as the fire and the smoke coming from the top of the hill. They went up and around and to look at this, and it was nothing but a dump. But they also saw a lot of skulls burning there. And when they rounded up the other priest that was down in the city and brought them up there to see this, they all got to thinking, since this is called the hell region, that if you aren't good, you're going to burn forever in hell, because the skulls were still in the fire a few days later. See?
That place was called Gehenna. And some of the Bibles in the verse that Jesus talks to Peter and says, "You are the rock, and I will build my church upon you, and the gates of hell will not exist against you," or something like that. But some of the books use the word Gehenna in that particular verse.
And that was really referring to a specific geographical location.
Yes, it is.
It wasn't something that is pictured by a man in a red suit with horns and a pitchfork and all of that.
It's like talking about the Montville City Refuge there, the Montville dump, okay? Gehenna was one of the dumps that they had where they were constantly burning things.
It's as simple as that.
Yes.
You got to remember, too, in that part of the world, there was a lot of mountains that were constantly blowing their top. And all of these brimstones were sometimes shooting out of the top, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they pictured that since people are buried in the ground, they eventually wind up down there, and the devil is down there, you understand?
Okay.
That's where all that came from. Okay. And then when they saw these skulls burning, they built up this thing only to frighten people so that you would do what they want you to do.
Now if we can, let's get back to the other levels of heaven, because evidently there are more.
There are a lot more levels. If we could have the next graphic up, please, from that series, which shows the third level, which is called visible light. And the third level is visible light. It's a lot brighter than infrared.
Okay.
When people die, they're told to go to the visible light, but that's not really a wise thing to do, because in the upper regions of visible light, there are some entities there that can stay there by stripping people of their knowledge. In other words, people go into the spirit world, and they spend about approximately 70, 80 years over there, and then they have this desire to come back and reincarnate into another body and to have another life to learn more things. And there's people who hang out in the upper levels of visible light, and to avoid coming back and reincarnating, they steal other people's knowledge. So what's best to do is to go into the next level, which is the fourth level, if we could see that one, and that is called ultraviolet. Ultraviolet is blue, which appears a lot darker than infrared. And there's verses in the Bible in Exodus that talk about that God was in the darkness. And actually, this is really the first level of where the more spiritually enlightened people start to reside. The fourth level is also the level where all healing energy takes place. Mm-hmm. So that when people are doing healing, they visualize this ultraviolet light around the person, this indigo blue vibrant light, and that helps to heal. And it's all coming from this particular area. The next level, the fifth level, would be X-ray. And X-ray is even higher. It's a more evolved state. And let me just state right here that let's say someone resides in X-ray, okay? And that person being spiritually advanced can tune into certain people, someone who might be in infrared. And infrared, let's say there's a person there who committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And if you commit suicide, you usually end up in infrared, the lowest level. And at a certain point, that person might realize how what a terrible thing that they did by committing suicide, and they were actually repentant, and they wished there was a way that they could fix it. Well, once they send that thought out that they want to fix that, and they want to move on and go through evolution to a higher state, someone in X-ray can come back and pick up that thought, go down and visit that person in the second level, start to teach them and help them to evolve to a more advanced level. The one on X-ray, the one in the infrared can't move up on his own. He has to evolve and earn it through knowledge and learning to a higher level. But ones on a higher levels can go down and visit ones on the lower levels to help bring them up in evolution.
See, I had always been taught, as well as many people had, that if you committed suicide, that was one of the most heinous sins or acts that there could possibly be, and you were damned to hell forever. But you're now saying to me that you have an opportunity on the other side to change your knowledge level,
Yes.
and then you can change your level in that dimension as well.
That's true.
It's a stupid thing to do, is to commit suicide, because each one of us was put here for a certain amount of time, and if we shorten that, we're endangering ourselves from evolving, you see. Now, to pick up on what he was just saying, the entities that would come down to help that person, they were called angels. This is where that word comes from, angels.
Angels actually in Hebrew means messengers.
Really?
Messengers.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the literal translation of that word.
And these are not angels who might be disguised that way, but are really devils.
And I got news for you, they don't have wings.
Okay. Where did wings idea come from?
Because they were in higher levels, and therefore there was no other way to get high but with wings as a bird in those
Okay.
days.
Okay.
Okay, they didn't have airplanes and things, or elevators, or
Right.
tall buildings, so you had to have
Okay.
wings to get high.
Okay.
Right,
Thank you.
exactly.
You're welcome.
Now,
Good
are there any more levels?
Yes,
to
there are.
this?
Okay.
All right.
After X-ray, if we could have the next graphic, it would be the gamma ray, which, again, I'm not sure which number it is offhand.
Gamma ray is number 6.
Number 6. Okay, and the final one would be the Godhead.
Godhead means absolute.
Okay, it's the absolute all-knowingness. The
All-knowingness.
ascended masters end up in this 7th level, which is the Godhead, and that's where they reside. Because they have as much knowledge as there is, I guess.
So you've heard us mention knowledge is your passport into forever. This is important because knowledge is stored in the soul, not here. This is only a receiver. A lot of people can't, there's so many people on the planet that does not know that where the soul is. They do not know that this is a recorder. It's like a computer. That's all it is. It's just like a computer.
So if we've learned or we've been taught to go to the light when you die,
Wrong go in the Congo.
So
I
that's-
tell everybody that.
that's
Go
not really
beyond
correct.
that.
Go
you need to go
beyond it.
beyond it because you could get stuck there.
Back into the darkness, yes.
Really?
Yes.
And these ascended masters in the last level, who are they?
Well,
They're the ones that have accumulated all the knowledge that's necessary. Remember, knowledge is your passport. And if you accumulate the knowledge, not recycled ignorance, I never heard that word mentioned, recycled ignorance, until I heard them talking to me about it when I was quoting certain things, I read in the Bible, and they said, that's just recycled ignorance. I want you are to be a teacher. We knew you before you were placed in the womb. And I also found that in the Bible too, and I had a lot of trouble accepting all of this, a lot of trouble.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, both of you are phenomenal teachers. And what I'd like to do is hopefully have some of our viewers give us a call at 889-1728. We are live. Should any of you have questions for either one of our guests and teachers on the topic of heaven or hell. I know all of you, like some of us, grew up with specific beliefs about these particular things, and some of you may be watching this show right now and maybe have a tough time digesting some of this because it is new and it's different and it's nothing that you're used to. But I will ask all of you to dig deep, think for yourself, call the show, and ask a question. There is no stupid question, and we are more than happy to speak with you and to hear your thoughts. So again, we're live, 889-1728. You could speak to Reverend Hewitt or Mr. Sidney Schwartz. Okay.
Tina, I'd just like to add a little bit about the concept of the devil, because not many people understand that the devil really was an evolution on itself. If one studies the Old Testament and looking for the word Satan in it, they're only going to find it 4 times in the whole Old Testament where it dealt with a, quote, evil entity. And all of those 4 books, those 4 occurrences occur in books that were written after 589, when the Hebrews were captured by the Assyrians and taken over to Babylon. And it was their contact while they were living in Babylon with the Zoroastrians, who had their religion. The Zoroastrian religion had 2 basic gods. One was a good god and one was a bad god. And they separated out good and evil. Well, the Hebrews all wanted to believe it was just one God. And initially in the Bible it talks about God creating in the Garden of Eden all good and all evil. And Job talks about God doing both good and evil. It was in there quite a bit until after they came up with this idea. They met the Zoroastrians. Then they decided that maybe it would be better to have God not do evil. So they came up with this idea of a fallen angel, and he was the evil one. But it never really caught on in Judaism as far as the biblical part of Judaism. But by the time Jesus came into the earth plane, those 4 or 5 centuries later, it was a much more popular belief. So therefore, it became much more entrenched in the Christian religion than it ever did in the Jewish religion, as in the Bible. Now, in the Mishnah and Talmud, which were written after Jesus was on the earth plane, there's more mention of it. So it's in Judaism, but it's a lot more invisible, and nobody really talks about it because it's not really a concept. But it's a lot more prevalent in the Christian religions, believing in a devil.
So now this notion of hell was really put into place to control people.
Yes, to make them afraid.
And it seemed like it in and of itself had progressed over time.
Yes, and it was also put in there to make people afraid, and so that they would live their life the way the church wanted them to. But it was also used to control them from seeking out spiritual advice from the other side, because all they put verses into the Bible, such as in Ephesians. In chapter 6, verse 12, it reads, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Well, if you're in the high levels of the spirit world, there is no wickedness. So they created this idea that if anyone heard a voice and didn't see that person that went along with it, it was the devil talking to them, and you shouldn't listen to that voice. They wanted to make people listen to the priest and not to anyone else.
Thank you. We have a couple callers on the line here, so we're going to take some calls and see who wants to know what tonight.
Okay.
Hi, caller.
Hello,
What's your name?
my name's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. What's your question tonight?
I wanted to ask, a few minutes ago you mentioned that a soul that is passed on decides to reincarnate about every 70 or 80 years.
Yes.
And my question was about the concept of walk-ins, and I was where a soul leaves the body early and then another soul enters that same body. I wanted to know if either of you believe that actually happens.
Okay. The question of viewers was whether or not it is possible, or there's a belief that one soul can leave the body and another soul can incorporate the body. Do I have that question correct?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Who wants to field that question? Is there such a thing?
Is there such a thing?
I've never heard of such a thing.
Okay. So viewer, you're referring to when someone is still alive.
Right, when somebody is still alive and they have a serious accident and the soul leaves that body,
Okay.
then another soul enters and reanimates that body.
Okay. So it's
that person's life.
thank you. So it's in a time of crisis or distress that the soul would leave the body and another soul could come in. Have you had any experiences like that?
I've never had an experience like that.
No.
Never.
No. Very interesting. Have you heard or read anything about that?
I've
I read something in a book by Ruth Montgomery,
Mm-hmm.
and I've also heard about that concept from another lady who does, for lack of a better word, I'll use the word psychic work.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I've heard the term walk-ins used because usually when someone reincarnates, they reincarnate back into their own family.
Yes.
And I've heard of walk-ins where someone picks a strange family to reincarnate into, but not so much what you're speaking of.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks for calling. Okay, we have another call. You ready for another one? All right. Go ahead, caller.
Hi. I was just wondering what your take on the Akashic Records would be. What you were saying sounded kind of similar to them.
On the cache of records?
Akashic.
Yeah, Akashic
Oh,
Records.
Akashic records. What is your take on the
Help me out a
Akashic
little
records?
bit on what she said. I mean, the volume is very low on the...
She would like to know what your understanding is on the Akashic records.
The way I understand it, and I might be incorrect, is that the Akashic Records are really recorded in your own soul. Your soul is the one that's keeping the records of all your past lives, and that therefore it's in your soul memory. But I've also read things where they seem to think that the Akashic Records are in this big hall in the spirit world.
You are correct. They're telling me here. You're correct. It is recorded in your soul. The Akashic Records.
The Akashic Records is really recorded in your soul, and you're the one that just carries it around.
Right.
Therefore, you have access to it once you get to the spirit world. Because if you had access to it in this world, you wouldn't be really living out the tests that you came back to see if you learned. It'd be like a crib sheet.
Right.
Did that help you, caller?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for calling. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, Carl. Hi, Sidney. My question is if, I think you may have just touched on it, if we have lived previous lives, if you will, why don't we carry that knowledge in this life?
Okay, you do carry the knowledge in this life. The thing is that you don't always have physical access to it. You can't control it. Sometimes within your life, you'll have certain inclinations that you want to go visit a certain place, and it's because you lived there before. It's called soul memory. And certain times, soul memory bubbles up into your conscious mind. But you can't consciously go into your soul and dig out these memories, because we come here to have certain experiences and to test to see if we really learn certain spiritual values. And if we really knew what those values were, it would be like cheating. So therefore, we really don't have that much access to it while we're in the physical world. But when we go back into the spirit world, we do.
I'd like to add to that. If a person in this world right now would have a knack of doing something, such as playing a piano or a violin or something like that, that means that that person has that experience of doing that same thing in another life, and that experience is in their soul. This is what makes it easy for them in this life, having the knack.
Thank you.
Did I
That's a
help you?
very good question.
Thank you for calling. Okay, we have still another call. Did you have anything else you wanted to add in between before we take another caller? So you were talking about the soul being a tape recorder, essentially, and that from time to time when we need it, we can call upon some of this memory that's stored in there?
Not so much that. It comes up on its own. Like
Okay.
sometimes if you have real strange dreams that you can't relate to,
Okay.
it might be something that happened to you in a past life.
I'm sure that a lot of callers out there have similar questions or to that effect with respect to the soul. And just as you mentioned, having a knack for something that doesn't make any sense in this lifetime.
Right.
I think we're going to pick up another call here. Go ahead, caller. Okay, let's try this one. Nope. Okay, so we've covered the many different levels of heaven. We spoke about hell, which there really isn't as it comes to be through the knowledge that we're gaining tonight with what the two of you can share with us. And we also have covered that it's very important to be sure that the knowledge you have here before you leave the physical body is the right information, because that can make a big difference on whether you sleep in a hospital, as Carl has seen with billions of people, which is just phenomenal, or whether you're able to pass beyond that and perhaps come back or reincarnate, as you mentioned.
Another problem is some people are so ignorant about death that when they die, they don't realize they're dead, and they can live in the house that they lived in for hundreds of years and not even know that they're dead. And if they had a disease, they would even keep that disease because they don't know they've died. When a person has an illness and goes into the spirit world and starts going up those levels, their body is whole and healthy again. They're not suffering from their disease, but if they're earthbound, which is they think they're still alive in the physical plane, then they still hang on to their diseases because they don't know any better.
You know, I had a question that I wondered, and I don't know if it crosses into this discussion or not, but you discussed that when we die, our soul leaves our physical body and it joins a spirit body.
The soul is the spirit body.
Okay. And some of my understanding had been that when you are buried in the ground in the cemetery, that's it, that's the end, no more.
It's not the end.
Okay, so we know that, but I'm also wondering if you're cremated and you're burned, what's the difference?
Allow me to explain something here. Let's say this person is here on the hospital bed, and the person is elderly, and the family is expecting them to pass any time, okay? So this person is totally out of it. He's not even aware of all the relatives there. And say the person is in their last 30 breaths, counting down, from 30 down to 1, and when they reach 1, the heart stops. The minute the heart stops, the soul leaves the body coming out of the top of the head, moving about 15 inches from the top of the head. And when it does, there's a cord that has kept it connected to the physical body. It's a cord of energy. That cord snaps like a rubber band would snap. The minute it snaps, the person finds himself standing here in another body, a body that never looks over 30 years old, even body is 80 years old.
That cord is called the silver cord, and it's found in the Bible in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 6.
Right.
You're kidding.
No, go ahead.
It's right there.
Okay.
So this person is in such ecstasy that they're studying everything in the room, because everything in the room has a different light around it than they're used to with the physical eyes. And as they study all of this, and they're so in such ecstasy, they think they're dreaming. And they certainly don't want anybody to wake them up. And while they're watching all of this, they eventually notice that there's a body laying here. And they look close at it, and I've never had anyone yet tell me that they didn't say the same thing. My God, that looks like me. Understand? And then the person is now positive they're dreaming, because here they're outside of the body and they see their own body. They think they're dreaming, but there's a group of people somewhere at a distance, and they're watching this person. They're watching them, but it's usually after they notice the body on the bed. Mm-hmm. They move in close, and this person sees them and recognizes them. They're their relatives that have passed ahead of them, see? And they come in and help them, just like if you went to another country and somebody would meet you at the airport, or they'd meet you at the pier or wherever. You understand?
They agree.
When Abraham died in the Bible, in the 25th chapter, I think it's verse 8, it says that after he died, he was gathered by his people. Gathered with his people, and that's what they're talking about here.
Same thing.
Okay.
The thing that you mentioned about cremation, when a body is buried, even though the soul has left the body, there's a certain amount of residual energy that resides within the body. Okay. And clairvoyants can go back to a freshly made grave, and they'll see the light around at the grave site. if the body's burned, that energy's released too soon, and it causes certain damage to the spiritual body in the spirit world.
Because fire itself is energy, okay? This is an energy body now that has just left the physical body. And the fire can destroy a great deal of this energy body. And so in the other dimension, when there are big events going on and everybody's invited, the burned people come in last.
Really?
Yep, they're called burned people over there.
Now, if we could just hold that for one moment. We do have a caller on the line who wants to speak to either one of you, but we can definitely continue this discussion.
Okay.
Go ahead, caller. Thanks for being patient.
Reverend?
Yes?
I believe that many years ago, I went to classes that you had in Salem,
Yes?
and I took lessons from Norma Connolly and Simone, and I was starting to see auras. Well, tonight on TV, on your palms of your hands, I can see red. Now, what? How does that? I mean, and I used to see it on the back of some of my friends' hands, purplish red. And I could see auras on some people, but I wasn't that good that I could, meditate. But I remember going to you and you gave a talk about when you were young, and then I can't remember the name of the mist that comes up. When you were giving your speech, it came up in back of you.
Well, a lot of people come to the classes and to the services. They oftentimes see the light around me, which everybody has a light. It's the light.
Yeah, I know.
It's the light coming from the soul. But I'm a little bit surprised that you would see a light by way of the television, because I've never realized that the cameras and this electronic equipment could transfer this kind of color. Do you have anything to say about that?
I've seen it before on people, and it's always on the palms of their hands. It's red. But I have seen it. My friend Nellie Gurrell and Connie Henson used to go to a lot of your things, and she was very sick. And on the back of her hands, I'd see purplish red, and I'd say, "Turn your hands over. I don't want to see your hands." And she says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I can see the back of your hands is purplish red." But that's all I could see. I wasn't really good at it.
Right.
But you were very good, and you told your life story, and it was so interesting, and you were so good that I had always wanted to go to a reading, but I never got around to it. But you did a lot of good, so thank God I almost passed by this program.
Well,
to get on.
Caller.
But honest, I have seen people, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm really going if I can see that. But I can see it on some people, but they have to be really, really good. I mean, the white. The couple that go around and they give free and they go to haunted houses. They were at Masonic Temple one time, and they came down and there was white light all around each one of them. And I kept nudging my partner and I said, "Can't you see that? Can't you see that?" And she said, "Leave me alone. I don't listen to what they're saying."
Caller?
Because they have so much power, I guess I could see that.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much for calling.
Okay.
Thank you. We do have one other person who wants to get their question in, and you can get more information at the end of the show if you want to stay in touch with Sidney or Carl. Thank you.
He looks much better, and he looks much more relaxed when I used to see him, when I saw him years ago.
Thanks for calling. Okay, bye-bye.
Go ahead.
Okay, I guess that's going to wrap up our show for today. Our other caller, thank you for being patient. We tried to get to you. Don't forget, we're going to be on this channel every Friday night live from 8 to 9 p.m. And each week the topic will change, but the guests will remain the same. And once again, I thank you so much, Sidney Schwartz.
You're quite welcome.
And Reverend Carl Hewitt.
My pleasure.
And I thank you, viewers. Tune in next time.